Hello, everybody. This is Angel Arts, and welcome to what I am referring to as session -1, session ready persona -1, which is very different from what I've done on my channel in the past. For those of you who are not in the know, uh, this is going to be the 9th tabletop campaign that I'm going to be hosting in my channel. If you want to have details of the whole audition process and how these handsome gentlemen are in front of me right now and got into it, I'll have links in the bottom just so you can get yourself caught up. But what exactly is a session -1? So the bizarre nature, or I shouldn't say bizarre, unique nature of this campaign is I got the players and I have sort of some character concepts that they proposed, but we don't have an alignment yet on what the world settings plural are going to be. That's the other added complication, because there's going to be a quote-unquote real world and there's going to be a quote-unquote video game or just simply virtual world, and then it'll have characters for both. So the goal for today is to try to come to some general consensus as to what the players are looking for, in terms of not only the settings but the tone, because that's pretty much going to establish or dictate what system we're going to be using. We don't even know what system we're using yet. As well as, ultimately dictate whether or not tweaks or complete changes or revamps have to be done to characters. So the good news is we've started doing some preliminary, very early surface brainstorming on the Discord chat, and I wanted a chance for all of us to sort of get together in one room and put our heads together and kind of start that planning process. Now, the only unfortunate thing is we have another player, Dan, who hopefully will be joining us soon. He's supposedly working, but maybe he might be able to jump in and chime in, because I would hate for us to pick something that he absolutely hates. I hate for us to pick something. So, but we'll see what we can. We'll start here and go see what we can do from there. So, I guess to start, we can kind of just go around, and I'm just curious to find out what are sort of very high level themes that you're looking for either of the worlds, especially if they pertain to aspects of your character that you really want to try to keep and maintain, and then maybe we might be able to come up with some options that will be able to accommodate that, if at all possible. If there are aspects of your character that you don't really are super attached to that much, that'll be valuable to know as well. So, for example, Dan's not here, but he was like, I don't have to be an amazing panda, which I personally would love for him to be an amazing panda, but if that was something that's it doesn't matter to me, then we don't have to worry too much about that. So who would like to go first?
So the things I would like to keep, let's start with that. So the thing that I was looking for mostly was the developments from character itself. So starting as a very insecure type of character and doesn't really know what he can say to people. He doesn't like to offend people. He mostly goes with the flow. And then I would like the virtual world to help him get that security a bit further. And then maybe have influence on the fact that some things will happen in the real world where he needs to, step in some less insecure shoes and start to decide things on his own. So maybe a virtual world that, has this capability of him, showing what he can do and giving him confidence and that kind of stuff. And then, putting that back into the real world. So the real world itself mostly can be anything, really. I think there was a lot of interest from public-wise towards the fact that he wasn't human. He was a bird-like creature. So maybe a world that can still encompass that would be handy. Other than that, everything goes, I guess. Fantasy, cyberpunk, all that kind of fun stuff. And then they have virtual worlds. as long as it has a capability of him showing that he can be there for other people and that he has qualities that can make him a stronger person. That's enough.
So the thing I kind of want to keep in my character is definitely that whole idea of him and trying to reconnect with his children. And like the stuff that I don't need to get rid of is like the Odin complete aspect. I'll try to find something else fun to do, but like that specific thing I don't really care about. It's more of the sense of like why he's doing this, and kind of like I want to kind of stick with more like how the persona kind of does things, where like there's kind of like two different kind of like major issues in persona. There's usually like the bigger issue that's throughout the game, but then you always have like these human moments between people, and the characters usually have to grow, usually in the social links and stuff, and they have to deal with like some real world aspects along with this weird higher end stuff, and usually them becoming better people is what helps them be able to beat that higher, greater evil or whatever we'll have to face. So I think a world that kind of fits with that. So like Joey said, a fantasy, a cyberpunk, anything that can fit more in that grounded personal stuff, I think would be really nice.
With Cade, I would say that my original interpretation of Cade had the world being about 20% IRL and 80% in the game. And that's kind of where Cade could work, is my original interpretation. So I imagine that doing, based off the question that I asked, where this campaign will likely be around 60% in real world and 40% out of world, I expect a lot to change about my character. And that kind of puts me in a place of a lot of flexibility, where for me, it's more like once we have the basis, then I'll be able to build my character up from there. But until then, I really don't have the putty to work with. So my answer would ultimately be quite flexible. I think case by case, I'm going to have opinions on, yes, that sounds interesting, or no, that doesn't sound very interesting to me. But other than that, I think flexibility is basically where I'm sitting at.
Okay. That leaves me, I guess, right? For Forest, a lot of what I had imagined for them was a little bit anxious, not self-confident sort of thing. And the virtual world would be a projection of sort of not necessarily their ideal self, but more like a super ego sort of thing. And I would like to keep that aspect, because I would use the super ego as a way to make Forest more confident. But in general, I kind of built Forest to be dropped in a campaign and they could just fit. That being said, I can change a lot about Forest. What I'd like to keep is their sort of heart of the party nature about them. And just Hark said it was cinnamon bun nature. But I'm fairly flexible too in that regard.
I guess for me, because I was talking about this in the chats, as Sage already mentioned, the way I had envisioned the campaign to go is that the main focus would be on the real life characters, because I wanted the real life characters to sort of be the anchor, to be like sort of like the base, the foundation, and then their persona is an extension of them. They can be, for example, what Ethan said, an idealized version of themselves, or however you want to interpret that. Which is why I was talking about like that 60-40 split. There definitely will be obviously a lot of chances for your main character to shine, but I wanted it to be sort of grounded to the main character a little bit more, and have the storyline in the virtual world to be a little bit shallower, not too shallow that you don't care or that there aren't any stakes. There certainly can be stakes, but my thought was for the real world setting it doesn't necessarily have to be darker, but I was thinking it would be deeper is the better word for it. Like, it's deeper, it's a little bit more serious in tone. Whereas the virtual world would be maybe lighter, lighter-hearted. It doesn't have to be comical necessarily, but could be used for some of the characters, depending on how you design them, could be used as like an escape from the seriousness of the real world, to actually have a chance to be super powered, or if you go to that route, or just have these amazing abilities that are very different from your own. So that's sort of like what I was going for and what I was envisioning. I also was telling the players that I would love the opportunity to explore fresh themes and just in general fresh things in this campaign that I've never really touched on as much in the past. So I know that a lot of people here were fans of the Avatar: The Last Airbender series, which I also enjoy as well. And I told them the only downside I see for that is that we already had a campaign that was dedicated to heroes who can manipulate the elements. But that being said, I know that Avatar is a very popular IP, and I also know that the lore in the world is very different from that in Dragon Age, especially when you add the Asian and Pacific Islander like elements to it. So there's certainly still things we can explore there. So that's just like an example of things that I'd like to try to leverage as much as possible for this campaign. But ultimately, I want to make sure it's fun for you all. So whatever you believe you're gonna get the most out of, the best experience out of, I will be in full support of. And if I feel like we come up with an idea that I don't think I can do it justice, I think that's the thing. If you come up with an IP, so let me just give an example. I know nothing about Star Trek. So if you were to be like, let's do a Star Trek campaign, I'm like, I have no idea like anything about Star Trek, so I don't know if I would be able to do it justice. But I know Avatar, I know Pokemon Mystery Dungeon kind of stuff. I know Fallout and Cyberpunk. So I'll be very like transparent about that too as well. So does that all make sense?
Sure does.
Cool. Oh yeah, at this point, feel free to. This is just meant to be a brainstorming conversational session. I know that some of the things that we had already talked about on the Discord, in addition to Avatar, was the idea of a Power Rangers like virtual world, and I thought you could even put an interesting twist on that and say, what if we were to mash up Power Rangers and The Walking Dead together, where it was Power Rangers, but it's in a very post-apocalyptic side of situation, which is very reminiscent of Power Rangers SPD. Power Rangers SPD, they kind of took the Terminator timeline, if you can believe that, the Terminator Doom Judgment Day timeline, and mashed it up with Power Rangers. Which I thought was a really interesting spin. So I thought it might be interesting if you did that with zombies, and then you could have even like a Monster of the Week thing where you're fighting superpowered zombies. But that's only if that's something that you are interested in. So,
Yeah.
So something that would help me, Hark, is what are you absolutely set on? Like, what are your definites that we can take and then work off of?
Yeah. I think I gave away all of the things that I highly prefer. You know, I hate to say definite, because if you really want to have, 80% virtual and 20%, real world, I'll do it. But if you propose that, I'll be like, I don't know if I can do it justice. But if you want to do it anyway, even though I'm not confident in my abilities to do it justice, I'll do it. But I'll just warning you right out of the bat that might not be my best wheelhouse. Like, that might not be in my wheelhouse.
Okay, so I have your preferences as you want something new, 40% virtual, 60% real, and a darker real world, and an escapist game. Is that accurate, or would you change that?
I would say it doesn't have to be a darker real world, but like a more serious real world, and maybe a slightly lighter in tone. The only reason, I guess what I'm saying is, it would probably not be as interesting if both worlds were the exact same tone.
Yeah.
If they were both lighthearted or they were both serious and dark, because that feels a little monotonous to me. And I know there's just an appeal, especially since I'm doing Athenaeum tabletop game. One of the reasons why people love the Athenaeum campaign, why the players love it, is because one session they're in comedy, but then the next session they're in horror, but then in the next session they're in mystery, and then the next session they're in a children's book, and then in the next session the tone just keeps shifting, and there's just something really fascinating about that. And I kind of think that would be interesting here, if there was that sudden shift in tone, but you're still grounded to whatever the character is dealing with in the real world too, if that makes sense.
I like that. That's cool. I think another question to kind of open up with is, does anyone want to veto anything? Just say like, I would really like to not play this.
Yeah, that's a good question.
So, because I know Ethan brought up like the real world having maybe like the zombie apocalypse, and I think I'm more okay with like the zombie stuff in the virtual world, but not much in the real world. Like I'm picturing the real world to be like maybe darker, but not like complete apocalyptic like that, or like zombies. Like I maybe if this was like a couple years ago when I was really into zombies, I would have been like, yeah, let's do this. But currently not the case, although I really do love the whole Power Ranger zombie one. So like maybe if that was more in the virtual world, that would be like good, but it's more for the real world. I'm like, I don't feel it.
Cool. I would say Pokemon is something I'm not super interested in diving into.
Yeah, that's fair. Which fits with what I was sort of leaning towards anyway, because we've done a Pokemon campaign already, and it'd be cool to be able to take the opportunity to do something totally different.
Yeah.
That's why in my interview I did not do a Pokemon World, because I was fairly certain nobody would want to do it. So that is why I changed it.
There's a lot of viewers who wanted to see it. A lot of viewers wanted to see it. But...
No, Explorers of Sky has some really dark themes. So yeah, we're not doing it. So
the mystery dungeons have some good themes that aren't like just Pokemon stuff,
especially the first two.
No.
Any other vetoes? Did Dan mention anything that he particularly didn't care for in his
I don't think so.
I thought he mentioned.
He mentioned I think he mentioned like the two to three like two ideas he likes for the video game, and then and I would do that for one of the real worlds. So mostly vague.
I'm just skimming through what he says in the chats.
Yeah, he mentions he was a fan of a Cyberpunk real world.
He's a fan of the Cyberpunk. He also mentioned that Avatar: The Last Airbender was one of his favorites, one of his favorite ideas. So that's something we could look into as well.
The rolling. What did you say? Sonic Panda superhero?
Yeah, I think he mentioned after he was like in a second other fair idea is a superhero one, because he just likes the idea of the panda coming in, swooping and drunk saving people.
Yeah. He wanted to do like a combination with the post-apocalyptic zombie thing and like the superhero combo and like a X-Men sort of thing going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's when somebody else suggested Power Rangers as being the superheroes. Boss fights.
It doesn't have to be. If you could just do a more general superheroes campaign, and it doesn't have to just be Power Rangers.
Yeah, because I was thinking if we go Power Ranger specific, it's kind of harder to explain that it's a virtual gaming world where a lot of people could be Power Rangers, and you have a lot of color Power Rangers running around in the world.
And even if it's superheroes, like a lot of things can still be a superhero. Like Cade's Paladin, the Paladin character could still be a superhero. Essentially,
Can go really broad with it.
You could go really broad with it. I mean, Bako is, to me, more like a Kung Fu Panda type of martial arts Jackie Chan kind of superhero to me, which is perfectly legit.
This is me just yeeting out an idea, but Avatar IRL, and then the in-game world would be the spiritual world, and it'd be like we astral project into our spirit forms, which could
That's
be
interesting.
Just an idea.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to try to do with Avatar is, so just full up transparency. I've seen all of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I have only just started watching Korra. I've only up to like episode 3. But if we decide to do Avatar, I'll try to make it a point to binge through as much of Korra as I can, so I at least can get that under my belt.
I'll have to start watching it.
You've never seen Avatar, Ethan?
No, I've seen the horrible movie.
No, that's
not. It. I lived under a rock for about 16 years, so.
Dude.
Just see the movie.
I half feel bad and half
know.
excited for you to experience it.
Ethan.
If we do Avatar, I may try, just to make it easier on all of us, I may have it be Avatar, but loosely based, as in, as I said in the chats, probably change some of the rules around. Like maybe there either A, isn't just one Avatar that gets resurrected or with every generation, or the rules of being an Avatar are a little bit different. The world can still be the same. Most of the lore can be the same. There can also be the same characters. So that's one thing I could might go, is just make it different from the core continuity, the canon continuity a little bit, just so we have a little more to play with, and still be Avatar. So
what if it was like a Kung Fu Panda thing where all 5 of us were trying to be chosen to be the Avatar, and we had to like compete and train with each other and also go on missions and stuff, and that could be
true.
Something there.
The rules could be such that you're not born as the Avatar. Avatar could be something that you would have to earn, or it would have to be bestowed somehow. That could be, and there doesn't necessarily have to be only one. So just thinking out loud.
Another idea pitcher for the road. It's kind of a twofer. One is like a more like cyberpunk kind of, maybe not specifically like the cyberpunk world, but like in that general vein. Or another idea, because I know, Joey, you put out your like, oh, let's maybe have a modern magic. So I took that. I was like, oh, what if we just ramp that up and just had it be like, because I know a lot of also people want regular D&D, and I feel like that might be a little boring. So what if we took the D&D setting and just cranked it up to the years of what if it was like during the cyberpunk kind of like years. So you would have like orcs and all like the general D&D races, and maybe some of the D&D lore just mixed with just the grittiness and the like cyber like the cyber stuff of cyberpunk, like in Shadowrun, if anyone's heard of that setting.
Yeah, Shadowrun, I thought did that.
Yeah.
I haven't done it myself, but I've always been curious about it. Sure, that could fit. That if you all want to try that, and you're saying that would be the real world.
Yeah. Yep. Because like I said, you can either have the VR stuff either be magic or tech. You know, in a setting like this one, magic and technology are at a point of sameness. So you can do that, and you can kind of have it so that maybe let's say if we do like a superhero campaign, you can have it, because I think I know the perfect system that would probably be good for like a superhero, like general superhero, where like, oh, maybe in our real world we maybe have some magic and some powers, but just like it's everyday kind of stuff. And then in the video game world, we have like the real like Thor level stuff where we're like really doing like I can't pronounce his hammer. Mjolnir, yeah.
Right. In the real world, like you can only do cantrips and maybe level 1 magic. Yeah. But then in the virtual world, you can go even higher than that, maybe.
Yeah, I love the idea of that both the Avatar world would have and the cyberpunk fantasy world would have, that we all our characters are just random people in a world where there are fantastical things like an avatar or high-level wizards / artificers that can do amazing things, but we are just the average folk that are walking around and doing the average stuff that you would encounter in a D&D campaign as an NPC. But that's something that we really find interesting, to just play the other part of the campaign, like what do the normal average people do in that world? And yeah.
So we'd be the level 1 NPCs that you insult on your way through the town. Okay. I like that. I really do like that.
Maybe that's where the video game world comes in, where we're the level 1 NPCs in the real world, but the video game we're the level 100s,
virtual world. We're the best.
Instead of doing the crazy stuff that the avatar does, you're just sitting in a tavern and you hear some news about the avatar crushed that kind of dude face first in the ground and all that fun stuff. We're just like, enjoying my tea
and what if
day-to-day
in
life.
the early bit of the game it was a little bit more virtual focused, so we had time to build up like our superpowers in the virtual world, but then in the real world, when the real party or the characters get a game over, so we have to step in as like, somebody's got to do it, and the players of the game failed, so
it's a major world event.
But I think that might be a little bit interesting.
Another idea that popped in my head that I also put in the Discord was, and this might change up a little bit of what Hark says about like escapism, but it was the idea of what if, like, instead of a specific game, it was just like the cyber world in general. And kind of like if you ever seen the first Digimon movie, Kodioko or Summer Wars, usually there's like some sort of creature that's running around the cyberspace, and as it's running around cyberspace, it's kind of messing up the real world a little bit. So maybe if you do like something like superheroes or Power Rangers or even like some sort of other in between, our character somehow are one of the few people that are able to fight them in the virtual world. And then like maybe it starts off as the escapism, and then we're like, oh no, we're stronger, or like our avatars are stronger in this like cyber world of the internet than normal. And then like maybe the monster of the week comes in and is like, I shall flood the city unless you stop me. And that can also play into the superhero aspect, where it's like maybe we give the video game world just a little bit more stakes, but the stakes don't really affect the video game world. It's still affecting the real world. So that
I really like the marrying between the virtual world and the, like you said, Code Lyoko, Mega Man Battle Network, where it's they're one and the same. They're the same story, but you're bouncing between them to get tasks done. But it'll be like, there's a virus in the oven, so the oven's on fire, and so the real life person's dealing with the fire while your online persona is dealing with the virus.
Yeah, the
and
whole
you can kind of bounce back and forth in scenes, which is pretty cool.
I think I mentioned it earlier today, or I don't remember if it was last night, but I had a little bit of an idea of what if the virtual and video game, well, the virtual and the real worlds were literally connected, like parallel planes. So I'm not sure if everybody's seen those, but it was like if a bridge is broken in the real world, in the virtual world, it might not be broken, and we could go into the virtual world, travel the bridge, and then come out and do whatever we need to do.
Titanfall 2, the time swap level was sick.
I saw that. That's I like that idea, or maybe like the concept of it sort of has a play on like the Upside Down from Stranger Things, or the world of light versus the world of dark, and like the Link, some of the classic Link games.
For sure.
Prince of Persia.
Since we were talking about what Kyle was just saying about having the digital world almost be like Digimon, and actually Sage brought this up with the Mega Man network. So one thing that I just thought of when Sage was asking, is there anything that I absolutely want to keep? Like, what aspect of the campaign do I actually want to maintain? I think for me, the most important thing that I would like to maintain, if at all possible, is the idea that your real world self and your virtual persona, I want them to be two very distinct characters, like with their own very distinct personalities. So if you were to do something like the Mega Man Network, that's fine, but I don't want you to just be Cade, but in the Mega Man Network, or Ave, but in the Mega Man Network. I want I would like for it to be Ave, but when you're in the Mega Man network or whatever virtual world, you're a completely different person, essentially, with a completely different agenda or a completely different personality.
So far, we've had it be like a player, and then the player has an avatar. But going back to the Mega Man one, there's the player, and then they have what's called the Navi, which is basically a different being. And so it's like two literally different characters, not just a character playing another one. So if we wanted to play with that, I'm cool with that too.
So like kind of going to the aspect of if we do like something like superheroes like I brought up before, superheroes usually have like a secret identity, and usually their secret identity like a Peter Parker. Peter Parker is different from Spider-Man. Peter Parker's more nerdy, while Spider-Man's more quippy and stuff. So maybe that could play more into it, where like our avatars in the virtual world are like these like superheroes. So and we play off as those superheroes. So in the real world, that's why like there's also a bigger disconnect.
Yeah. If the virtual world is an actual game that people actually play, that means that what I would like to see is that it's a very strict, like heavy role playing type of game, or you happen to be in the heavy role playing server, which means you're not meant to break out a character. Like, you're not supposed to reference things from your real life or from the real world. You are that character while you're playing that game. And maybe, like, you get penalized if you break out a character, things of that nature. So I think, yeah, that kind of aspect is the only thing probably is the most important thing for me to keep.
All right.
As we talk.
That works.
Could be a reason that you don't want to be associated with virtual characters. Maybe there's some anonymity part thing that you want to keep. Maybe
possibly
could work with that.
So just to recap on what's been talked about so far, so there was the idea that Sage brought up, which was the real world is the Last Airbender world, and the virtual world would be like the spirit realm. There was the idea of having more of a Shadowrun real world, where you kind of mix the fantasy, classic like D&D fantasy with cyberpunkish or higher technology kind of setting. And then in terms of the virtual world, like we were talking about, Power Rangers are superheroes. I think that the Walking Dead zombie apocalypse is not off the table as long as that's in the virtual world only and not in the real world. We were also talking about the possibility of the virtual world being a parallel dimension that sort of mirrored the real world, and things that you did in one kind of loosely affected the other, which I think is a really cool little concept. What else? Like, what are the things?
So at this point, I'm just going to say, like, here are my main preferences. Kind of like,
sure.
I think having a bounce back between the virtual and the real world where they're intertwined and you're working in both. Like, it's not one story, separate story. There's like a connection. And I forgot what my second one was. I had a second one. I forgot it for now. I'll let you know when it pops back in my head.
Okay. So you would love to have some sort of connection between the two, and they're not completely separate from each other.
I think it would probably, like, this is a concept that I think if, like, a very high utilization of this concept is by doing this in the virtual world, it affects this in the real world. By doing this in the real world, we have to work with our other personas to get things done. It's not just
that makes sense.
Separations.
And that kind of happens in the Persona game too, a little bit. Yeah.
So I think, I don't need it. I just think it's really cool. And so I'm just putting it out there in that regard, that's really cool to me. And then as soon as the second one is back, I'll let you guys know.
I think to keep connectivity, maybe along the lines of something that the virtual world's AI kind of stuff that plays the monsters or the NPCs is kind of evolving a little bit too fast. And maybe there are connections that are coming back to the real world. The AI that's getting too smart and wants to achieve certain things in the real world as well, and that therefore the monster are kind of doing things that aren't really that good, that are having influence on, let's say, a power plant, or just like Digimon, really. Some random evil monster code is kind of breaking and just launches a nuke towards a random city.
That actually reminded me of the second one. What you
That's
just said.
happened in Digimon.
Yeah, the second one is the monster of the week. I do like what you were talking
Mhm.
about, Hark, where it's something new every session. So like, I think I would prefer to have a zombie episode than I would to have a zombie campaign. And I think
Yeah,
doing
that's the
the
point.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think doing the marrying of the real world, it's like we're just going about our lives and then this problem happens and we need to go fix it with the bounce back between us and our other persona. And then the next episode can be a different problem that we have to go solve a different way.
Mhm.
So those
That's
are
true.
two things I really like, but do I need them? No. But I think if we can push them that way, I would be really excited about that.
Mhm. Yeah, I think Monster of the
Yeah, I
Week
like
would
that.
work best with something superhero like that, be it
Like,
Power Rangers or generic superhero.
and like Hark said, it's really Persona. Like, it really does feel kind of like really Persona, because Persona has like the two worlds kind of always to get separate, but always together in some sort of
Mhm.
small way. Like in Persona 4, it's the murder cases. In Persona 5, it's the cognition, where like doing stuff in the real world changes the cognition here, and while also changing their cognition here does something to them there. So that could be something cool where that can also be really done really well.
Mhm. And it doesn't only have to be monsters and NPC things that happen. Maybe something that we as players do influences things in real world as well. Maybe mistakes that we make could have potential causes in a city that gets out of electricity, for instance. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't. Maybe it's not necessarily a monster, but like the
Mhm.
problem of the week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we could
And
be
that-
thrown on more
More
like
diversity.
RP sessions.
And that gives me a lot of freedom because I can definitely surprise you of what the problem of the
Yeah.
week is. Because like it's zombie apocalypse this time, and then the next time it's something hopefully that you don't really expect to see coming. Because it could be more darker, but it also could be really lighter, or even just plain silly, but hopefully fun silly. So, you know,
Some
there's a lot of
random
things
My
like
Little Ponies.
random My Little.
Maybe our party's like a little task force that is
Yeah.
hired to take care of problems in the city that are tied to the virtual or something.
Or the virtual world could be like some sort of, maybe not necessarily game, but like some sort of tech that we have that helps us combat these problems.
Mhm.
And like traveling into the virtual world gives us different powers and abilities, but it also makes the problem maybe a different problem or even worse or something like that. I don't know.
One crazy idea I have is I would love for this to be I would love for there to be like audience participation in this. And by that I mean on the Discord channel or Discord server, I could create a very specific channel that none of you all are allowed to be in. It's private to all of you all, but everyone else can access it. And that is purely like a channel where people can send me suggestions or ideas for what the scenario of the week would be.
Can you do polls?
I really love that. The more we
Yeah,
talk
Discord?
about it.
I think you can do polls.
It could be pretty cool. Like if we're interacting with an NPC and we do something, you can put out a poll to say like, how did the NPC react to this? Did they like what they did, or did it piss them off? And then the audience can decide how the NPC reacts to our decisions. Just an idea.
Yeah, that
butterfly
might be
effect.
that might be a little bit difficult to do like in real time.
Yeah.
That's fair.
So that's the
Yeah,
only complication I see
could be
with
a-
that.
Yeah, it could be a butterfly effect, something that we do. You see it, well, that's an interesting thing that they did. Let's put it in a poll and see what effect this has within 2 or 3
More
sessions.
long-term stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a good. I like your thinking though. I like
Yeah.
the thinking out of the box. But yeah, I thought it'd be kind of neat to be able to like come up with those ideas, and then within that channel, I could do a poll, and then I'll just pull them out, and use them in future sessions. I think that might be interesting. It'd be really
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, it might. Yeah. I was back thinking what you said, Ethan. Maybe it starts as a game world really early, or maybe backstory early, and then something happens and it evolves into more of like a task force system where the world is interacting with the real world and we fucked up. We need people to solve stuff now. because oh god, what have you made?
Yeah,
Something
or
along
maybe
those
the
lines.
overarching problem is that the virtual world and the real world are like converging,
Mhm,
and it plays back to like that parallel universe sort of thing,
mhm.
where it's more literal, and it's slowly starting to be like you can clip through walls in real world, or in the virtual world, if you eat something, you'll actually be full. And
Uh,
But I would like to keep the fact that it at some point was a gaming world. Something like the escapism. I really want to keep that one.
So you would like to try to keep it a game if possible, at least at
At
first.
some
as a game.
point to start, yeah.
To start is a game.
Not in the sessions, but like maybe backstory level. I would like it
Sure.
to have been
Okay.
a game world, just for the idea of the escapism. That doesn't the reason why we are part of this thing.
And that doesn't take away from
Mhm.
Cade's character, for example.
Yeah.
Because there can still be an oasis that Cade. I mean, if Cade's still doing, the incarcerated thing, might be a little bit difficult to get him interacting with any of the other characters if he's incarcerated the whole time, unless
It's his
something
community
happened.
service.
I'm sorry?
It's his community service.
Yeah, his community service. Yeah.
or it could be that
That's the biggest challenge I have with Cade is I'm not super worried based on what I've seen, how I've seen Sage handle Cade. I'm not super worried that he's going to be super problematic within the party. I'm just trying to figure out realistic ways that he can actually interact with the party, with the real character party, if he's supposed to be this dangerous serial killer that they're trying to keep incarcerated.
I really feel like my concept with Cade was potentially for a different campaign. That he's cool, I like him, but I'm not sure if his design is right for
He's
what we're
going to fit
doing.
for this.
And if I need to let him go, I'm totally cool doing that.
Unless Cade is
Suck, though.
some sort of race that really lives a long time. And then the Oasis part was the early parts of the game world. And maybe it started as that prison-like kind of world, and then
Ooh.
slowly evolved into more and more people, and then gaming worlds for some reason. Things evolve strangely in history.
Another thing is that, like I said, if we go with like the cyberpunk idea, like cyberpunk's world is already like normally any cyberpunk work's already really dangerous. So so you can probably maybe not go as like full on as your initial idea, but you can still make him relatively more dangerous and less dangerous, because in a cyber kind of like cyberpunk kind of world, there's a lot of people that are just dangerous that are just walking around. So that you can still do that in that kind of like setting, because that's not that's common, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, infinite possibilities. For me, it's really just like whenever we decide on what the campaign is and what the world is, my character will fall into place pretty quickly afterwards. But I think the world's got to come first.
I like
that's fair with
do you like
everybody.
the idea of the evolution of the virtual world, what it started as and what it currently is? Because that's really interesting, world building wise.
Yeah, it is.
So, what are people leaning more towards with either of the worlds? Are people leaning more towards Shadowrun? Are people leaning towards Atla? Are people moving towards what? How are you all feeling at this point?
I almost feel like Atla is a different campaign. I think it's like there's Atla and then there's Ready Persona 1 with the two worlds, and we're kind of, force smashing them together. Not that I'm totally against that. That also sounds fun. I think.
Yeah, let's just throw away the whole Persona 1 auditions and just do this.
We'll just do Atla.
Yeah, just
Even though that was one of the things that people voted on, and people specifically voted for this over Atla, we'll just ignore the polls, completely ignore the viewer's choice aspect of this whole thing.
So welcome to Dragon Age Season 4.
Right, Dragon Age Season 4. Okay, how do people feel about that? I know, again, Dan's not here, because I know Dan really liked Atla, but I have a feeling he wouldn't care as much if we threw Atla out.
I think he would, for the real world, actually, would like both ideas. Because he was a fan of Cyberpunk and of Atla. So.
He was a fan of Cyberpunk and what? I'm sorry?
And Atla. So either would be fine as a real world fan, I think.
Does it feel like the real world is going to be more like Shadowrun?
I think so.
Is that what
From-
people are feeling like?
Yeah, I think
I'm feeling that one, yeah.
seems to be a common.
Kind of guess what Shadowrun is, but can you I've lived under a rock for
Shadowrun is, think D&D characters like orcs and dwarves and elves and wizards and all that, but they're in the modern world.
Okay.
So
yeah.
like instead of having your typical paladin, well, the paladin character is actually a cop. And instead of having, I mean, you can still have magic. You can still have magic, and you can still have that like that whole like social aspect of orcs are generally not trusted, and you know.
Actually, I think that is something we should bring up, is how heavy do we want this campaign to be? Do we want it to be like really in depth and maybe not dark, but really real? Or do we want it to be, in general, maybe there are some dark themes or deep themes, but they're not like real world parallels?
So do we go PG-13, R, or PG? I think is another way to ask the same question.
As a GM, I work best when I have a PG-13 like baseline, mostly because my campaigns tend to be so character focused, like, and people the joke for many of my players are like, "Hark, make me cry." Like, I just want you to make me cry as often as possible. I was like, okay, I'll make you cry, suffer if you want, emotionally even. And it's easier for me to do that when it's PG-13. But that's not to say that there won't be like lighter moments too.
I like PG-13.
Yeah, and sometimes things can go more towards the R in very rare occasions when it's warranted. But it's pretty much hovering around the PG-13 like realm.
Yeah, I think it needs both. If you go too dark, people are just gonna get anxious.
Maybe we
Viewers
cut
as well,
the difference and go TV-14.
I think one world can be one and the other world can be another.
That could
I think the real world can be PG-13 and the other worlds could be more PG. I wouldn't go G with the virtual world, but maybe PG. I don't know.
I like that. Well,
I mean, Finding Nemo's G, right? That was pretty
dark.
Yeah, especially at the very beginning.
The virtual world will have a whole bunch of like censor nugs, like trying to like, enforce the rating of this server.
And that could be your penalty for doing out of character, is you can censor nug on you.
There we go. Okay, so it feels like we're kind of set on Shadowrun-ish as the real world, which is good. So in terms of the virtual world, how are you all feeling for the virtual world then, if we're doing Shadowrun as the real world?
So, okay, I think a distinctive question for me would be, is it me playing something or having goggles on in the virtual world? So is it me just with a different face? Or is it like a compilation of code that creates this separate entity that is tied to me but is not me?
Yeah, I guess part of that, like, in order to answer that, we have to figure out, is the virtual world or game, is that technical or magical? Is it sci-fi, or is the source of it magic? Like, that's the part that might help a little bit.
Well, if we are doing like a modern fantasy sort of thing, it could be like an artificer, both sort of going on. So we could
part magic, part tech.
Yeah,
it's true. It
A
could be
marriage of dwarven and elvish magic, and
sure. In which case, then, to answer Sage's question, you're asking, is it something that you actually have a control in you're playing?
Right. So if my character needs to turn off the oven using the internet, I don't know, whatever, does he need to plug in and turn off the oven, or does he just tell his counterpart, hey, go do that while I'm doing this? Hey, go turn off that.
Yeah. So we can do this a number of ways, because we actually chatted about this a lot on Discord, like in Hangouts chats throughout the whole audition process. So one thought I would like for it to be is as immersive as possible. So I'm thinking less, you're in front of a TV with a controller, and more you're like plugging yourself in.
Right.
One other thought concept that people came up with, which I'm figuring out how I would pull that off, but was to have sort of like an AR technology where you have these glasses and you're in the real world, but because of augmented reality, you're still
not.
You're not, if that makes sense. I'm not sure how that would work.
Okay.
It could be that it's the first thing, but the technology, and if we go with tech and magic, technology is starting to ramp up because technology just increases exponentially a lot in the real world. So it could be one of those things where like, oh, right now it's just we plug ourselves into the game, but tech companies are like, no, we gotta do better. And then they're trying to bring like the digital world more into the real world with AR.
So one concept I had was this technology, or whatever you want to call it, may have evolved over time, where the default is you're plugging yourself in and your body is remaining stationary somewhere, whether it's in a pod, whether you're just sitting in a chair and you have like glasses or goggles or whatever, but you're just remaining stationary, and then your consciousness goes into this world. But maybe for the real fanatics, the people who are super into this game and obsessed with the game so much they don't want to literally live and breathe the game, maybe in the city there is this designated this designated neighborhood, which is, you can think of it as like a LARP but to the extreme, where people go into this part of the city and are just fully submersed in the game in and of itself. They're wearing these goggles and they actually are moving around. So if they're buying something from the shop, they're literally like buying things from the shelves of an actual store physically. But the way that you're perceiving it in whatever virtual world you're in. And so that's like a separate section of the city, specifically for the people who want to experience that game in that way, et cetera, et cetera.
So it's kind of like you can go online and play Dragon Age, or you can go to the medieval fair down the street and do Dragon Age.
Yeah. And part of the things I'd like to explore in the story is if this game, or playing this game, is a huge part of people's culture or everyday life, and if people are obsessed with the game, how far do they like to take it? Are there people who choose, what, my life sucks, I'm just gonna I'm just gonna be in this game the whole time, 100% of the time I'm just gonna be in this game. Are there religious groups that end up having this cult kind of thing where they're worshiping, I don't know, this god that's in this game or something,
machine spirit.
Right, exactly, the machine spirit. So there's a lot of things that I thought would be really cool to explore in a story like this, how a world that has that ability to escape into this other world, how society would change and shift a little bit and be a little bit warped, which I guess sort of Ready Player One kind of touched on a little bit.
Yeah.
So
as far as what you need from us, Hark, do you feel like you have enough information to build what needs to be built, or do you feel like you need us to provide anything else?
I don't know if we finalize what the virtual world is.
Yeah, I don't think we did.
That's the big thing I need to know.
I'm leaning towards the. Oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, all right. I was leaning more towards the superhero aspects. I definitely do think that can, even when things get more serious, that can still play into the what do you call it? The whole power fantasy that the virtual game. So even when things get serious in the video game world, it's superhero serious. So you're still Iron Man or Thor doing these cool kind of things in there, so that you don't have to lose the core of this escapism, even when that kind of gets lost a little bit.
Yeah.
And if we do the superhero route, we can still make the virtual world be a parallel to the real world. So, like, for example, if there's like a bar in the real world that's really popular, maybe in the virtual world that bar is actually like a casino or something. Like something
It's the
like
tavern where the travelers meet the wizard and accept their first quest.
right.
Mhm.
That we could do a little bit of a play on that, where the map between the two worlds are similar, but maybe it's in the virtual world it's more idealized version of
Mhm.
that specific building or structure or area. If there's like a rundown park in the real world, in the virtual world it's really nice and there's like fountains and like, I don't know, stuff like that. I'm just playing around with it a little bit.
Yeah. From my audition with Forest, I don't think it was really ever touched on, but my virtual and real worlds had that exact parallel. Not necessarily it was a one-to-one copy,
Mhm.
but the real world was like a diesel punk and really dirty and dingy and just terrible stuff going on. But the virtual world was like a steampunk, very clean, technologically superior, even while being nice and good to the environment and everything. I had a point. I completely forgot my train of thought. Wow. I'm sorry, guys.
It's okay.
Wow.
Chaos.
Kyle, your virtual character could be that amazing anime character you proposed for the Athenaeum campaign.
Yeah, the return.
That could give you another chance at at playing that character. I don't know, just
I might be able to bring back the Oracle then too. I don't think it'd work.
if we're doing the superhero route, which I think is the most flexible, because we don't have to define what's the magic level, what's the tech level. It's just pretty much dependent on whatever type of character you want to make. And I think that I just caught what Ethan caught. What's my point? What was my point?
Running, no, bro.
Going around.
It's
I'm glad it's coming through.
It's contagious.
Quickly.
Gosh, I was trying to say something. Doggone it, Ethan. So I guess the nice thing about this is we probably could still utilize the Shadowrun system. I think it would be a nightmare to try to do two different systems for different worlds. Because if we can keep the same system for both, that would be nice. And I feel like we have the flexibility of that. Maybe.
I don't think the Shadowrun system itself, the system of Shadowrun itself probably wouldn't be the best, because I played Shadowrun and you legitly need to, at least in my opinion, someone who's I played with someone who's played for years, they legitimately need to get a software, and then someone else who had to and he had to build it for me. My recommendation, at least for the system wise, would either be GURPS again, because GURPS is general, or if you want to go and try a different one, I recommend Mutants and Masterminds. Is a superhero system, and what it does is there's different power levels. So you can have the real world, since it's tech and magic, start at the really low power level, which is the street level people. So it's we still have magic and stuff, but then you can give the people who are in the video game world the really Justice League level PowerPoints. The only weird thing is that you don't, the amount of PowerPoints you gain is very slow, because it's supposed to represent how superheroes don't really change too much. They do get stronger a little bit, but they don't get too much. So generally your power level is around the same, but you do accumulate a little bit. So I would recommend that.
I think that would be okay. I think that'd be fine. I think I've actually played that system before, way back in the day. And I think since it's very specific to superheroes, that might be better than GURPS, which is more generic. I remember the point I was trying to make just a moment ago before I caught what Ethan got, which is it would be really cool if we're going to do superheroes. It'd be really cool if each character, if we had a very diverse representation of the characters. So if Baka was more like the martial arts superhero, Kyle's character is more of the the anime, like Naruto or whatever, like superhero. If Sage wanted to be a paladin, like that's more of the classic like Tolkien-esque D&D superhero. And then I don't know what Ethan. I mean, Ethan's got yellow is like the steampunkish.
I can
like,
see I was the fifth choice.
perfect dark Lara Croft, whatever.
Should have been the ginger man.
What? Wait, I'm sorry, I didn't catch what you said, Ethan.
Oh, I just made a joke, like, because you couldn't remember my name. Like, I must have been the fifth choice, man. Like,
I didn't remember your name. I thought I called you Ethan.
You said Eva, and then you're like, oh no, Ethan, and then.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry, Eva.
No, it's fine.
Freudian slip. I remember your character's name was Yellow. That's what I remember.
Forest and Yellow, yeah.
It was all yellow.
Yellow was like it's like a mastermind rogue sort of idea. Well, Forest, I had like a kind of like a therapist sort of like mentally healer sort of person, not necessarily a physical healer, but with like some bardic inspiration.
And then I'm not sure what Abe's superhero would be like, but
There's still a lot of options open.
there's a lot of options. And the nice thing about this too is that you have all these NPCs that could be representative of all these different types of heroes as well, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
I like it. I don't know if the rest of you, do all four of you like this idea? Are you okay with this idea?
We might have put the horse before the cart
Yeah.
here.
I think clarification. So, we're in the I forget what it's called, the Shadowrun.
Shadowrun.
Yeah.
Shadowrun. Shadowrun, but we're not using the Shadowrun system.
Right.
So Shadowrun, I mean, think D&D, but in modern times.
So
or
like,
cyberpunk
I'm an
times.
orc. Let's just pretend I'm an orc for a second.
Let's pretend you're an orc.
And then I plug in with goggles or whatever, and then I become a superhero. I guess a question I'm looking forward to answer is like kind of why? Why do I want to be this superhero? What am I doing as a superhero?
Yeah.
Is it part of my job? Is it, yeah. So I guess that's some clarification that would probably help me.
Well, I was already married to the fact that the Oasis is the starting point, so that you were just thrown in the Oasis as whatever reason you need for your character, and then it evolves into a game.
So if it's for fun, like it's a video game that I'm there to be a superhero for fun, I guess at that point what I'd be looking at is like, how do we marry those two? Kind of the concept I was talking about earlier, where they help each other, where you do stuff here to help out here. But if I'm just there literally only to goof around and jump over buildings, what is that doing for the real world?
It could that it starts off as goofing around. And since we're doing with the magic and tech, since it's magic and tech can together can really freak out. So maybe it starts off with our characters doing this for personal reasons, such as like either we want to relax or this is our favorite game or whatever. And then then that starts happening, and whatever reason, either we or like everyone else, this becomes more of a bigger issue where like, oh no, we actually have to be heroes now in the virtual world to see.
Gotcha. So it was separate. Now there's some sort of overlap happening, and we're responding to that overlap.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Some role-changing events, yeah.
There's also the idea, like maybe in order to help promote the game, there's monetary rewards that aren't necessarily just virtual monetary. Like maybe if they'll do like this promotion where, hey, if you defeat this really hard dungeon or if you defeat this really difficult creature or whatever, then you get real life credits, real life gold or real life credits. And or there's other aspects of the game, like maybe you have this side hustle thing where you're power leveling like these newbie low level characters, and they give you money on the side just to power level them. I know, so there's a lot of possibilities in terms of what your motivation is for playing the game. And if you come up with some motivation, most likely I'll be like, that sounds great, we'll just make that an aspect of the game that you get all this money for doing X, Y, and Z, if money you think is a thing. Or if I'm trying to think if there is still a way, because I know that Sage is very nicely trying to say, hey, it doesn't have to be Cade necessarily for my character. But I mean, if it was to be Cade, like, it would be interesting if, there was this Oasis program that was trying to, like, deal with rehabilitate through experimentation, rehabilitate these dangerous criminals by putting them into this world. And maybe Cade escapes. I don't know. But maybe somehow they had something ingrained in him. Maybe he has, like, this injection where he has to spend X number of hours in the game or he'll die. I don't know. Like, he can't just escape and then leave the game forever. Like, he has to plug into the Oasis. But there's a risk, because every time he plugs into the Oasis, he could get caught. Of course, he could also get caught in the real world, too. So, maybe he has to, like... one of the ways he has to flee from the cops or whatever is he has to strategically unplug himself from the Oasis, like when they're about to catch him, and then they have to wait till he appears again to catch him. I don't know. There's a lot of things.
It all sounds fun. Like, all of that sounds fun, but my concern with it would be, like, that's a lot of elements for one character. If it's like we were all taking part in escaping the cops, yeah. But if it's just me, I feel like, I don't know if you're cool with it, but
it doesn't have to be like that big. Could be a minor inconvenience that affects the rest of the group if you're part of our team.
I would try to, like, as a GM, I would not make it every 5 minutes there's a cop going after you. You know, I wouldn't do that. I would probably keep it, like...
Gotcha.
Yeah,
I would manage it so that every character can still, like...
Well, it's just your fun little wrench that you can throw at us whenever you feel like.
It's like Team Rocket.
Right. I can make the police force as incompetent as you need them to be. It's like, have you seen this man? Kay just has, like,
a mustache.
the mustache and, like, the glasses, and they're asking him directly. It's like
the nose from the tangle.
Not a single time.
Always get the nose wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The chief of the police or whoever's doing the investigation is just, like, this really bumbling idiot. I don't know, and like reminiscent of Inspector Gadget. I don't know. With a daughter named Nickel or something. I don't know.
It could also be a thing where all 5 of us, like, if you go back to, like, the read, the chemistry read, where in the virtual world we were selected for, like, a social experiment. What if all 5 of us were selected, going back to what you said earlier about motivation and everything? What if there is, and real world connections, more importantly, is what if, like, the company randomly selected 5 players and, like, you guys you have, like, this advertising thing for us and we'll support you and everything, and we throw these things at you every week, and you kill them and beat them up and solve the problems, and we'll pay you, and also it's fun. So yeah. And then maybe Sage gets thrown in there by accident, but they can't redo it for whatever reason. So the police force is like, okay, but...
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what event forms you into a group or forms into a party. That I want to wait and see what backstories you give yourselves.
Yeah.
And once I get the backstories, then I have to figure out how you all become a group, essentially. So what I'm going to do for the rest of the night is I'm going to type up, because I wanted to wait till we had this conversation. I'm going to type up your questionnaire, and it's going to be like, I'm going to be asking you basic things about your character and your backstory and all that good stuff. My recommendation is, in order to help give me as much freedom as possible, when you're writing your backstories, when you're writing your characters, try to write about the things you care about the most, and anything else that you don't care about as much, just leave it really vague, so that I have a little bit more freedom. Because some people are like, I have these 5 NPC characters, and here's their backstory, and this is their favorite food, and this is they're allergic to this. Which, I mean, if that's important to you that they're allergic to that, great. But or they're writing me this backstory that takes up like 5 different pages, and I'm like, this is great, but it doesn't give me a lot of freedom or wiggle room here. Can you condense that down to like 4 things that are absolutely important to you about this character? So that's my biggest like recommendations, because otherwise, you run into the problem of me coming back to you and be like, "Can I cut this and this and this, or change this and this and this?" And I'd rather not do that. If that makes sense.
That's correct. Yeah. Biggest gift to a GM is a backstory with holes, because then they can fill whatever they want.
I can fill in whatever I need to.
As a player, that's really interesting because
And
you don't know what's going to happen.
You don't know. You don't know what's in those holes. Right. And the last thing I'll say about your characters when you're making them is, normally when I go through the audition process, I can kind of picture how the characters, not the players, how the characters work as a unit in terms of chemistry, and like who sort of fits what specific role. Like, this is the character that's more of the comic relief. This is the character that's more of like the peacemaker. This is the character that makes things happen. Like, they don't wait for things to happen. They instigate things to happen. You know, this is the player that is, you know, the nurturing one. So, you know, I kind of liked the idea that Ethan's character is the cinnamon bun. Is the cinnamon bun. It's like
we're going
a
off
little
of a
nurturing
5-man band sort of thing.
Yeah, I kind of see Sage, if he still has that idea, to be a little bit more of the, you know, if I need to, like, if everyone's like spending too much time thinking about what to do, I'm just going to go over and kick the door down. I don't know if that's what he would do, but I feel like that's sort of like the role that I saw Cade doing. And then Jack, I guess with you know, Dan, Jack sort of strikes me as probably the one that is the most anchored, I guess, like the most like voice of reason maybe, but he also has a soft spot with his, I don't know. There's just things to consider when you're creating your personalities, is just trying to not overstep other people's roles, if that makes sense, in order to make a cohesive unit, if that makes sense. So something to consider.
So what do people want then? So I don't want to overstep myself. I know we've already talked about me being kind of like the heart, maybe a little bit comic relief, and Sage. Wow. Oh my God. Hi, Sage. Just Sage being like the sort of
the rebellious bad boy,
bad boy Lancer sort of character.
Lancer kind of character.
So, like, what would everybody want if they had their choice of like heart, leader, Lancer, smart guy, and brute?
I think I'll go like, especially for the video game. I think the thing is going to be in the real world, he's probably the smart guy, but in the video game, like you said with Odin, because I probably might just go with Odin again, but go with just the more anime version of what he would be. So the whole point is like, the whole point of like the strong man and the party is he might not be the best, but or like the strongest at everything, but he's just reliable in the fight. So that's when we're gonna go be like, huzzah! And
that's
jump right in.
Powerhouse.
Yeah. Ideally, because I would love for your virtual characters to be different from your real world characters. Ideally, your roles will be different between the two worlds. So I would encourage that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think from the 5-man band in the virtual world, Cade would have been like the strong man, and out of the virtual world, I'm guessing Lancer.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything specific that you saw me playing, Mark? Just to give me an idea? Or is it a blank film?
Ave, well, I see Ave going many different directions. Because I think, I feel like you have the ability, like all of you do actually, you have the ability to just fill in the gaps as needed. So, whatever you think is best, honestly.
All right.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Yeah, same actually.
It's harder. It's easier for me to speak on this with Sage and Ethan because they were in the chemistry read. So I saw a little bit more of their characters. Whereas with, I hate to say it, your interview was the shortest one, only because Ella was a rock star in terms of keeping everything within 10 minutes apiece.
Such a good timekeeper.
She was great at that, and everybody else, they meandered a little bit.
I just 50 minutes.
So the little that I saw of Ave was obviously enough to get you into the campaign, because I was paying less attention to your character and more attention to you as a person, along with everybody else. So I don't know how to answer that question right now.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I think.
Yeah,
Well,
I
we
feel
can,
like
we can discuss within our group what directions we're going with regards to spots to be filled. So I'll just sit back a bit and see what comes up, and then I can fill. It's fine.
Okay. Well, I was looking for my real world character to kind of be the heart or moral support for the group, and virtual world to be more of a Lancer character.
Yeah, I see Yellow as a Lancer. Definitely. What happens if I just shoot these people? Oh, okay. Well, I guess we've proven that they kind of
Yeah,
think the same anyway.
I got all the best ideas, guys. Don't worry about me. I can do everything by myself.
So fun. I'm excited. Please try to fill in Dan as much as possible. Hopefully he'll be okay with all of this. I think he will be,
Yeah, I think
based
so
on the
too.
stuff he was saying.